Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have some very important visitors today, visitors from the past. These are the 4 Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity who were instrumental in starting this hospital and operating in the kitchen, the garden, and other aspects of the hospital here. So I want to give them a warm welcome. I'm going to introduce Mother Alexia, and then she'll introduce the rest.
Well, it isn't every dinner that you get to have entertainment. Well, in German, I would greet you by saying Guten Morgen, and that means good morning. But I think now it's Guten Tag. I think we're into the afternoon now. I am Mother Alexia, and I was born near here in Manitowoc Rapids on November 9th, 1854, which means that tomorrow I turn 163 years old. My father was Joseph Fulmer, of German descent. My mother was Margaret Whalen Fulmer. She was of Irish descent. I'd like you to know that I knew Mother Gabrielle, who was the founder of our community. When I was a little girl, we would make sure that she got to Mass on Sunday morning, so we would take her as a family. And to her, my nickname was Chunky Pauline. And when I entered the Franciscan Sisters years later, I remained Chunky, but I took on the name Sister Alexia. I was a teacher for 10 years, and then at the young age of 31, I was elected as the community director. And I held that position for 5 terms. And it was during my term as the leader of our congregation that I saw the need for better health care for those people in the areas where our sisters were teaching. So during my 2nd and 3rd terms, I opened up 2 hospitals, one in Zanesville, Ohio, and one here in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. I also opened a home for the aged in West Point, Nebraska. I was fortunate to be in the leadership position when our community celebrated 25 years as a community, and then again when we celebrated 50 years as a community. My birthday happens to fall on the Founders' Day, the day that our community was started. Now I'd like to introduce to you some of the sisters who are here with me today. First we have Sister Seraphica, and she worked at training our sisters as nurses in the very first hospital that we had, which was St. Mary's Hospital. And it was the precursor to this particular hospital that you work in now. Sister Seraphica?
Hello, I am Sister Seraphica Eulen. I was born in Hildesheim, Germany on November 10th. So 2 days from now, I will be 173 years old. I was already a certified teacher when I first entered the Poor School Sisters of St. Francis in Hildeshausen, Germany. During the Kulturkampf, our schools were being closed by Bismarck, who was taking over, and so we needed to come to the United States. I was very happy to come to America and to be able to belong to the Franciscan Sisters here and to help with the education. Now, education was our main ministry, but at that time there were no hospitals, and so the clergy and the citizens of Manitowoc wanted very much for the sisters to be able to start a hospital. I was one of the first sisters who was trained in pharmaceuticals and in care for the sick, so that when we did begin our first hospital, St. Mary's, which is on just a little dwelling on 23rd South 23rd Street, which you can actually see today, I was appointed the first hospital administrator and then was involved in training nurses. Later on, of course, in 1888, it was impossible to keep that small hospital open because there were too many needs, and It was very, very small. So in 1899, we began the newer hospital, which was located here. 37 rooms was the hospital. We had 3 adult wards. We had electricity, which was practically unheard of at the time. But our superior was very interested that we have a state-of-the-art hospital. We had a passenger elevator, we had electric bells, we had lights. The cost for a private room and nursing service here at the hospital was $10 to $20 per week for a patient. For a ward hospital bed, it was $1 a week. However, people were very, very poor. And so at most, many of the patients were only able to pay $4 or $5 a week for services. The sisters, 13 sisters were assigned here with me, and we did everything. We did the nursing, we did the cooking, we did the serving of meals, dishwashing, we did the cleaning, we did the laundry, we took care of the garden, and we also tended animals, which we did. Also, we went out begging for the hospital. For the first 25 years, our sister day nurses slept in the same beds that our sister night nurses had used the night before. During the Depression, the 4 years of the Depression, we had long food lines outside the hospital. We took care of many charity patients at that time, and we fed as many transients as we could. What we felt we were all about was the glory of God and taking care of suffering humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. We appreciate your sharing with us today. There's a cute story when they moved from the old hospital into the new one, that they had the elevators built. But when they made the move, they took the patients down the steps in the old hospital and carried them up the steps in the new hospital, and only after everybody was settled did they remember the elevator was there. But now I'd like to introduce to you Sister Clarence, who worked as our gardener for many, many years and helped to feed not only the sisters and the patients, but visitors and staff. So welcome, sister.
Thank you very much, Mother Alexia. And thank you for calling this hospital. Oh, what a great adventure. I want to tell you, glory be to St. Patrick. Would you believe a wee lass like me, born in Wexford, Ireland back in 1872, would join the Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity, whose membership was predominantly German. Here I am, in Ireland, and because Mother Alexia wanted me to, of course, serve in the hospital as a cook, starting out as a gardener, I grew cabbage, and then I had to learn to make sauerkraut. So that was one of the top things on the menu here. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit more. Would you like to hear it? Would you like to hear it? Okay, so I'd be certain to tell you some interesting things. One of the very interesting things is that Sister Seraphica, where is she? Oh, there, Sister Seraphica. You know, she talked about the Depression years. And she talked about how we had so many poor from the city coming. And some felt so ashamed. And it was just because there was no work. And the men would hang their heads. They just felt so embarrassed. Sometimes they would see their neighbor. They just felt embarrassed. But Mother Alexia, you always told us to be hospitable, that hospitality was a core value. I think today they would call it part of the mission. All right, so hospitality, we fed the poor. Sometimes we had less, we were happy to do that. One last interesting fact, which you might want to hear, is that during the Depression, I think, of course, work was scarce. But in 1933, the shipyards got an order for 3 ships and then for 5 big freighters. So our census went up because there was more people, more work. And Mother Alexia, again, you had done your work. You had talked to the doctors, and you had told them to not be afraid to send patients to the hospital. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And if you'd like some sauerkraut, let me know.
And I was so very happy to provide Sister with the cabbage stopper or with sauerkraut stopper. That was a new invention back then, too.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it helps so much.
That's good. Now I'd like to introduce Sister Reinhardt, who was the cook here for 54 years in the hospital. Sister?
Thank you. I am Sister Reinhardt Carroll. I was born on February 22nd, 1897 in Norman, Wisconsin. And that's in the county of Kewaunee. Oh, I bet you knew that. Everybody here knew that. You were close by. I entered the convent in 1917 at the age of 20. And 4 years later, after making first vows, I came here to Holy Family Hospital at 1921. I was a lifer. I worked in our hospital kitchen for 54 years. After I did retire, I spent my time visiting patients, so I was always here at Holy Family Hospital. There were a lot of changes that happened during that time. The oldest of our buildings was taken down. New wings were put up. We were moving, we were cleaning, we were always doing something, and we were doing fundraising for them. I worked in the kitchen. It kept steady work, no matter what was going on around us. And I liked it to keep logs. And so I kept logs of the things that we were doing, especially how many meals we served, because we had a lot of people to serve. We had the priests, we had the sisters, we had guests, we had an old nursing home people, older people, we had the nurses and the aides, we had our student nurses, we had our patients, and we had a night crew. That was a lot of people. And sometimes it was well over 700 meals a day that we prepared and served. I also like to keep a log of the canning that we did, because we also had our wonderful garden, and we also bought fruits. Can you imagine that in 1942, strawberries, still expensive for us, were $2.50 a case. Cherries were 5 cents a pound. So we bought them and we canned them. We did our canning until about 1961, I think it was, because by that time, canned goods were cheaper and easier for us than doing all the canning. But before that, every corner of our cellar was full when we did our canning. But if I could just have a little pride for a minute, what my claim to fame really is my bread. Everyone who knew me as a person here in the kitchen knew about my bread. The employees would smell it in the morning, the patients, employees, and I sold my bread, as well as keeping enough bread for all of the needs we had here. I would sell it to our employees and to some of the visitors. Many times it was also used for fundraisers for the things that we were building and doing here at the hospital, but also for outside of the hospital, such as for our college, where they had their fundraiser. So it was well known for my bread. I also had a very soft spot for our student nurses. So I had a special cookie cutter. It was a large cookie cutter, and I kept it hidden. I did not have it out all the time. It was made specially for Christmas and Easter, and the cookies were decorated, and they were given to our student nurses that were in our nursing school, not made for everyone else. At one time, I was asked to write a day in the kitchen. Oh, that was quite a process to do. How do you write all the things that happen in the kitchen in a day? But I attempted to do that, and I started with getting up at 5 a.m. and getting all the breakfast ready. Now you remember all those people I mentioned that we did the meals for. Well, they all had to have breakfast, and many of them early, and not all at the same time, and not all in the same places. But we worked on getting it done. And then came the supplies. How many of you are familiar with a dumbwaiter? That's what we use. Up went the supplies to each of the floors and the places using the dumbwaiter. And then, of course, we had to prepare for dinner. That was a given. But we couldn't, as Sister mentioned, we could not forget the poor. The poor were at the door. Many times it was those who jumped off the trains, but also it was the people in the city itself, in the village itself, because it was hard times. And we took care of them, feeding them and giving them their coffee, especially in the morning. But oh, in that day in the kitchen, the phones were constantly ringing as we were doing things, because that's how people communicated with us to let us know what they needed on the floors. So they needed this in peds, or they needed this in another floor, or this patient just came in and needed a particular thing. And so it was a call down to the kitchen to get it. In the afternoon, it was canning, and it was baking, and it was cleaning. The day was always busy. And then, of course, getting ready for supper as well. You might ask, well, aren't sisters supposed to pray? And that is true. But in our life, as we worked as a group in the kitchen, we weren't very often at community prayer. We tried to sneak out at 6 in the morning for the 6 o'clock Mass if the phone wasn't ringing and needed something to be answered. And we tried to make the 7 o'clock benediction in the evening. Otherwise, it was basically private prayer for us when we went up to our rooms at 9 o'clock to have some time for prayer and to fall asleep. But I chose to have a special intention for each hour of the day. That's in my logs too. A special intention for each hour of the day, so that I could put myself in God's presence with prayer in all of the chaotic busyness. Thank you.
Well, we hope that you enjoyed our little historical presentation. You know a little bit more about the early years of our community. And I did enjoy Sister's bread very much. That's why they call me Chunky. Enjoy the rest of the day.